Okay. Hi. This is my first video, and it's a review of the employment-based green card interview. I don't know where to put my hands. Is this the natural position for the hands? Yeah. Yep. So I went through the green card process recently under the EB3 category, and while I was going through the process, the law changed, and before they only used to require green card interviews for marriage-based green cards, but now they require green card interviews for all employment-based green cards too. I tried to search on YouTube about reviews of how the interview process goes, but I couldn't find anything. Now I want to go over the actual USCIS field office. So my appointment was for February 8th, Friday, for 1:40 p.m. at the office. I was super nervous leading up to this. While I was going through my adjustment of status form, I discovered that there were a bunch of typos. The first typo was on my permanent address. The second typo was my parents' current addresses. So it said that they lived in Seoul, but they don't. Then the third typo, which got me really panicking, was my passport number. I noticed all of these typos like a week before the interview, some only like 2 days before the interview. And I emailed my lawyers, and every time they got back to me and said, oh, it's no big deal, you just mention it during the interview. But then I was really scared because, like, do I bring it up if the interviewer doesn't bring it up? For my 1:40 p.m. appointment, the appointment was on Sansom Street near Little Italy in San Francisco. It's the USCIS field office. So of course I went to their Yelp page, read through a bunch of their reviews, but they had 4.5 stars. So that's a really good sign. It was about a 15-minute walk from my office. And then around like 12:30, I left for the USCIS field office. I went in and there was a security guy. He asked to look at my interview letter and my ID. So I gave him my interview notice and the driver's license. And then the security was very quick. Went to the elevator, went to the second floor reception, just as my appointment letter told me to do. Right after you get out of the elevators, and there's only like one way forward. And there are 2 reception desks, and one was called A and the other was called B. So I figured that you check in at the A desk first. So there was a woman there, and then she asked me for my interview notice and my ID. And then she was like, okay, I'm gonna take your picture now. And then she told me to check in at the next desk. So I went to line B. Both lines were empty. The guy asked me for my interview notice again, and then he said something, but I don't remember. He said something, and then told me to go wait. So not wanting to be difficult, I just like took the interview notice that he gave back to me and then went and found a seat. It was about 30 minutes before my interview time. So I was like, okay, I have time. I'm gonna try to figure this out on my own. As I was looking around, I noticed that on the walls, there were repeating letters. There was C, 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 A, and then B, 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 B. I took a look at my interview notice again, and then I noticed that he had written something on it. He had written B. So I was like, this must mean that I have to go to the B section. There were also doors with letters on them. So they called my name about 20 minutes after my actual interview time. And it was a lady who walked out from the B door and called my name. And I was like, yes, here I am. She asked me to raise my hand like this. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth? You know, the usual. At this point, I'm still thinking about the typos that I need to correct. Because I said that I would tell the whole truth, she asked me to give her all of my IDs. Brought out all of the identification that I had. That was my driver's license, my current passport with my L1B visa stamp on it, and my social security card, and my current employment authorization card, so my EAD card. So I put all of that on the table, and then she took everything, and then she took out a big file that I assume had all of the documents that I had previously submitted. And then on a clean sheet of paper, she copied down the numbers printed on each of my identification cards. She also asked me where I worked. She asked me to provide her with an employment verification letter and some pay stubs. I had everything organized in a neat file, so I pulled it up. And then she asked me for the W-2 as well. And like, I swallowed my panic and told her, oh, I didn't bring that. She was like, oh, that's fine. We have your pay stubs. That was a relief. She started going through the actual adjustment of status form, and she asked me my name, birthday, and address. And I was actually so nervous at this point because I was still thinking about the typo that I like hesitated about my birthday, but I don't think she minded. She started going through current address and previous addresses, and at that point I told her, oh, so actually there is a typo, my Korean address. And then she just took a pen and then crossed it out, corrected it directly on my adjustment of status. That seemed to be fine. Like, she was like, oh, that's fine. At each point when she arrived at the next typo location, I just spoke again. It was completely fine. For the passport number, she was like, oh yeah, I see the typo, but don't worry, we have your real passport number. This is not a big deal. I felt much more relieved. So next comes a yes or no question section. And this is a section that takes, I think, like 2 or 3 pages on your AOS form, and hopefully you have answered no to every single thing. They go over questions like, you know, oh, have you willingly trafficked people? Have you received military training? And she asked every single question. I had to say no, and then wait for her to ask the entire question and then say no. When you talk about these questions with your friends, I was like, oh, have you willingly trafficked people across the board? It's so ridiculous, but they're serious about it, so you need to be serious too. After we had gone through the entire form, I had to sign that all the corrections were correct. She did ask me a little bit about my job. I had worked for the same company, but in 3 different places. She asked me if my job duties had changed. I was a software engineer all 3 times. I think that was what she meant, but I was like, oh yeah, I mean, like, my job like expanded, but otherwise the same. And she was like, what do you mean by expanded? So I was like, oh, more meetings. And then she wrote that down. That was part of the corrections that I had to vet and sign. And after that, she said, okay, your application looks good. Are there any other documents that your lawyers told you to bring? And I was like, whew, but there are so many documents. Like, I had an entire binder full of documents. So I was like, yeah, I brought my original birth certificate. And she was like, oh, we don't need any of the documents that we already have a copy of. Are there any additional documents? I had 2 that weren't already in her file. I gave her a copy of my diploma, and also I had printed out my transcript from college. So I gave her a copy of that. She put it in file. She printed out a piece of paper, and it said that all the application looks good. There will be a background check before the final decision is made. When I got back to the office, I remembered to check the case tracker app on my iPhone. It said that the card was being produced. Wow, I guess that was it. Yeah, after about a week, on February 15th, it said that USPS had my card. So I was like, huh. And then the same day in the mail was my card. The entire timeline for the adjustment of status took from June 2018 to February 2019. So how many months is that? It's 8 months. In 8 months total, from submitting AOS forms and green card in hand. Yeah, that was it. I'm pretty happy. I moved to the US as a student in 2009 to attend college. So that was 10 years ago. So 10 years from student visa to green card in hand. And I plan to stay in the United States for a while, so I'm pretty glad. Yep. One advice that I would give to anyone who has an upcoming adjustment of status employment-based interview and maybe has a few typos is just to be organized. Go through your actual I-485 form. Make sure to note anything that is not correct. It doesn't matter if it's not correct in the form. What matters is that you correct it during the interview.
Right.
Yep. See ya, guys.